Okay, Sharon, what idea are you selling us today?
My idea today, Krista, is motherhood is your greatest competitive advantage.
As the mom of three, I love this idea. I'm immediately buying it, but I'm feeling like some of our listeners might need a little bit more. So,
Okay.
first, tell me, what do you mean by your greatest competitive advantage?
So I realized after being a stay-at-home mom for almost 20 years is that, and I think we all know this, raising kids is this Herculean task.
Yes.
And no master's program anywhere, I don't care where you go, could come close to teaching you what you learn from being a mom. And I feel like it is a crash course in the skills that actually win in life. We're talking radical empathy and split second decision making and crisis management and the ability to read a room with other people who really could care less about your ability to read a room. And of course, you do it all in minimal sleep, which we can all relate to. And so motherhood does not just build these leadership skills, but it builds them at the most sort of relentless, high stakes level imaginable, because running a family isn't like running an organization. It is an organization. And this is not a soft skill. It is a competitive advantage. And no mother should have to apologize for or explain the years she spent earning those skills.
Oh, yes. Preach, preach.
Ooh.
Yes, that is a strong sell. I love it. So let's get into your story because I
Okay.
would imagine that when you were in the trenches of motherhood, you didn't necessarily see this as a competitive advantage. Am I correct?
That is so correct. That is so
Okay. So
correct.
how
Yeah.
many children do you have and how old are they right now?
We have three kids. We have a son who is 32. Oh my gosh. A daughter who's 29 and a daughter who is 24.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they are all grown and flown.
Grown and flown. And the younger two girls are aging up shortly. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. So when did you realize that motherhood is a competitive advantage? Was this something you saw as you were raising them when they were a little bit older, or did you not realize this until they had already left your home?
It somewhere in between.
Okay.
They were still, I say maybe our son had left, but I still had the two girls at home. And I realized, I kept thinking to myself, what do I want to do when I grow up?
Mm.
And I realized that the question, I'm already a grown up. The question was not, what do I want to do when my kids grow up? But not what do I want to do when I grow up, but what do I want to do when my kids grow up?
Mm.
For those of us who, really dialed it back and did the stay-at-home mom thing. And over the years, I realized I was developing skills that I never had before. We volunteer a lot, right? Like who wasn't volunteer of the year, in whatever your nonprofit of choice was. So I realized that, perfect example, a nonprofit that I worked with, I used to always be afraid to ask for money. But
Mm.
between working with a nonprofit and also fundraising at the school that my kids were at, I got over the fear of asking someone for fill in the blank amount of dollars. We're like event planning and we're organizing like everything from play groups to putting in that new playground in the local park. Or there's so many little things that we do while we are home with the kids, in my perspective, or in my situation, that it sort of like started to dawn on me later on. And I sort of compare it to like my advertising career. I was a copywriter, associate creative director, and there I knew like what was expected of me, and it was high paced and I was leading teams, and I loved the life of being an advertising creative, but I knew what was expected of me. And when you become a mom, it's sort of like blindsides you, right? You
Mhm.
do not know what is expected of you, no matter how much people tell you, until you're actually in the trenches. And then you realize, whoa, all the things that you're doing. And, and in some ways I sort of bought into the idea that I became a stay-at-home mom and everything that I knew before just got put on a shelf. But that was so not true, because whatever skills I had before, my creativity, my communication skills, my ability to come up with a pithy one-liner that could become the theme, of the fundraising event for the school, that was all still there. I was just using it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, I was still using my negotiation skills and trying to sell an idea to a client, but now it's with a 4-year-old who doesn't want to leave the park. So, all of these skills are like super transferable. And I think that really started to dawn on me, I think when my kids were probably like middle school, high school and beyond. And then I realized, wow, I have so many more competencies, core competencies that that I didn't realize I had before. And they were there and they were useful and I was using them. And I thought, wow, this is like a whole new me that's sort of being reborn.
Yes, yes. And I think a lot of women are developing these skills, but they don't see it as such. And so when you
Right.
had this epiphany, you had this realization, then what? Because even those women that see it and recognize it, a lot of times feel stuck
Right.
and like, okay, well, now what? How do I put
Yeah.
this? How do I translate this to a resume? So what did you do when you had this big realization?
So I think what's important is that this isn't just a skill set that I happen to have. I really realized, wow, this is a competitive edge, because I can now do so many more things than I was able to do before. And now, when we get older, we tend not to think or really care as much about what other people might think about us, or right. We get to a point where we're like, I'm beyond that. But that's a powerful place to be, Krista, because we are confident in who we are. We've walked many, many miles in our shoes, and that is a really good thing. And so, it's sort of like everything that I used in advertising, except now it's sharper because I built it under conditions that no business school could replicate. And so how do women figure this out? How do I figure it out? I realized, I don't know, maybe within the last like 7 or so years, that these skills belong on my resume. And I was going through that, oh gosh, LinkedIn is so naked right now. And I realized, no, all of these skills belong on my resume and I proudly have them. If you look on LinkedIn, folks, you're going to find that my stay-at-home mom years are there, how much money I raised, how I raised kids that are, they understand morals and values and how to give back to society. Those are really important things, at least to us. And I think those go to any sort of future job you might want to have, or career or entrepreneurial skill, entrepreneurial idea that you want to move forward with, that these skills will live with you and they are an advantage. They are an edge because we have the empathy and the resilience and the grit and and just the gravitas that we know that no 20 or 30-year-old really has yet.
Oh, yes. We're going to link your LinkedIn in the show notes because as you're talking, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go see that. And I want to get into that a bit more. But I did read on your website, I believe, that you called yourself a tech boob, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Define tech boob. What does tech boob mean to you?
Okay. Tech boob for me is I just can't figure everything out with like the email and many chats. There's just so many different, like doing what I do now, like with the podcast and growing a brand, is that there's just so much tech in it. And I an avowed tech boob, meaning I suck at tech. But I am pushing forward and I am learning, right, as I'm doing it. So I think that's really important. And I think I have a growth mindset that I know, from that Carol Dweck book that I read years and years ago. I realized, wow, I have a growth mindset. I just didn't have a name for it before. And I think I like pushing the boundaries. I like trying things that I haven't tried before. I think that's one of the reasons I like, my competitive Latin ballroom dance is it pushes me every single time I go out on the dance floor. And I just, to me, having that sort of mindset of like pushing forward, and I also realized that motherhood is not a detour from any sort of competitive edge. It is your competitive edge. It hones those skills and it makes us stronger and more resilient because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing there's really two pieces of the puzzle here. So one is in those 20 years that you were
Hmm.
home with your children, you're realizing you're developing these skills. And so it's
Hmm.
about understanding how to transfer these skills literally
Right.
into a resume, into
Hmm.
your LinkedIn profile. And then also being aware that the world is moving ahead and there are
Hmm.
technological advances that you may not have kept up with, but that should not stop you. That's okay.
Hmm.
And you have to have a growth mindset and you will learn them or you can hire people to help you learn them, right?
And
So getting
mhm.
training and not being intimidated by those things. And that's what you're doing beautifully.
Yes, thank you for saying that. And yes, if I don't really understand something, I have a group of professionals that I could like call and say, "Can you explain this to me or help me out
Mhm.
with this?" I think it's really important for all of us, no matter where we are in our careers, to have people that we know that we can call on. And my husband always jokes, he's like, "I'm really not your tech advisor, but." Um, and nor does he work on a Mac. So sometimes he really I have to figure it out myself. So I can pop it into AI and I can figure out, what the solution might be. I also think that when a mom actually buys into this thought process of motherhood being your greatest competitive advantage, I think it's everything because once you stop thinking about motherhood as something you survived and start seeing it as something that has trained you really well, you stop sort of competing from behind, right? You stop apologizing for the gap in your resume. You walk into a room, whether it's a job interview or a client pitch or a business idea that you have been sitting on for years, and you're not behind the people who never left the workforce. You're ahead. And I'll repeat that. You are ahead because you have the reps that they just don't have. And so that does become your your competitive advantage. But it's something you have to internalize, it's something you really have to believe and just know that it is there for you. All those skills are there for you.
Absolutely. So let's get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of this. So, for
Okay.
a woman that's listening and is like, okay, I love this. I have been out of the workforce because I have been raising my kids.
Mhm.
And I hear that these skills that I have are transferable. But how do I go into an interview and accurately explain this resume gap? What would you say to her? How would you coach her into navigating that in an interview? Because I think there still is a stigma that you've
Mhm.
been out of the workforce and it feels hard to kind of close that gap sometimes.
Right. Good question. I think it has to start with your attitude,
Yeah.
your personal attitude, knowing that I have all of this experience behind me and I carry that with me proudly. And so start with that sort of a mindset reframe
Mm.
and say, okay, I have this. I think in terms of someone like walking into an interview, you have to have a really strong idea of, well, what exactly have I done over all these
Mm.
15, 10, 15, 20 years? And I would recommend to every mom listening, if you haven't started already, go into your notes app and then start writing down all the things that you have done. And you will be gobsmacked
Mm.
by all of the leadership roles and the nonprofit roles and just everything that you have learned over the years. Like you helped organize the fundraising event for your school, and wow, you guys, you earned you they took in $100,000. That's significant. Or you were volunteer of the year for a nonprofit, go back and think why, like what was that? Or you were on the development team with your school from a parent perspective and you helped raise however many hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Those are all really important. And even small little things like organizing, um, a group of moms, like a book club, for example, organizing that. I mean, that goes to organizational skills, logistics, procurement, communication skills. I mean, think about I think the hardest thing I've ever done is negotiate with a 4-year-old, because
So true.
you tend to always lose in that. But, having that, having the confidence in yourself to go in to any sort of interview and say, those were not fallow years, those were years, and really start listing off like what you've done over all those years and why they're relevant to whatever you might be interviewing for. And if you're starting, an entrepreneurial venture,
Mhm.
even better, because it's all you, and just know that whoever you talk to, those people don't necessarily know that you've taken time off. What they know is that you have a great idea, that you're the voice and the soul behind that great idea, and that really you're selling yourself. But as much as I don't like, I think it's sort of like the sales process, because if you ask me about, can I sell things? I think I would originally say, okay, I suck at sales,
Mhm.
but I can sell myself, and I can sell
Mhm.
something I believe in. And that's true of any mom out there, that you can always sell something that you are excited about and that is inherent to who you are. So I would say start there and just have that confidence. You go in just, I got this, guys. That goes a long way. And then, the other thing I would say is ask your spouse, your significant other, your kids, what are you good at? And I think you'd really be
Mhm.
surprised. Ask your friends too. Like, why are you friends with me? Why do you think I'm good at, what do you think I'm good at and why? And you will get information about yourself that you never probably expected to receive. Some of it, maybe you'll go, okay, that makes sense. Some of it is totally going to come out of left field for you, but that's how other people see you. And within that, you can find your strengths, and how then, how then you could move forward with that new sort of ammo that you have about yourself.
Absolutely. It's the glass bottle analogy. I use that a
Yeah.
lot with clients in when we're talking about storytelling and messaging, but
Mm-hmm.
we're all living inside our own glass bottle. And on the outside, there's a label that says, our story. And in your case, what you're talking about is the skills and the things we're really good at, but we're living on the inside and we're reading it backwards. And it's
Right.
very hard to see that. But everyone else is looking from the outside in and can very clearly see, oh, you're amazing at organization and you're amazing at fundraising and you're amazing at XYZ. And
Right.
so asking other people can bring so much clarity. I'm glad you brought up entrepreneurship because in your own journey,
Mm-hmm.
that is what you decided to do as
Right.
you founded the Mom to More podcast. And so I want to hear a bit about that. How did you decide for you that was the next logical step when you were moving out of full-time stay-at-home motherhood?
Right. Thank you for that. So the whole idea was sort of brewing for a while. And I sort of had this idea, and I thought, well, wait a minute. I went back to my love of dance, and I thought, I'm pursuing something like a passion or hobby that I absolutely love, and I continue to compete, although not as much as I'd like to this day. Um, I realized that there were so many other women that I knew who had spent a period of time as a stay-at-home mom, and they were starting nonprofits and media companies, and they were authors and photographers and jewelry designers. And I thought, wow, no one's talking about this.
Mm,
And I thought, if not me, then who? And if not now, when? And so I reached out to a couple of women that I knew. My very first interview was a woman who had gone from being a photographer to a visual artist. May I interview you? She said yes, and did a bit of a deep dive into how do I even do a podcast, and actually started on Zoom, which I'm no longer on,
mhm,
and I just started recording, and people would then, after I would interview them, they'd say, oh, you should meet so and so. And then I would meet people at crazy things, like in an event, and I sat next to this young woman and telling her what I did, and she's like, oh, you need to talk to my mom. I mean, it's like that sort of thing.
mm.
One of the things I did, which was at first I thought it was selfish, but then I realized, no, this is really for posterity. I interviewed my mom,
Oh,
who didn't have her first paying job until she was 50 years old. And I thought, she had a reinvention. I must tell this story. And people who've known my mom for, 50 years came to me and said, I learned things about your mom that I didn't even know about. And I've known
Mm,
her for the better part of my life. And so I realized that these stories needed to be amplified because they're, they're, they're strong and they're energetic and they just go to all of the skills that we were honing and fine tuning while we were, and I'm putting this in air quotes, right? Just raising kids, anything but, and how women have just so beautifully and brilliantly and forcefully moved on to their next chapters of life. And so that's really how that came about. And I realized that there were a whole lot of podcasts about women in various phases of motherhood and a whole lot of podcasts about women who were reinventing, not necessarily moms, but just women reinventing. And I realized that I created a niche that didn't exist before. It's like really taking
mm,
women who had been a stay-at-home mom or women who were like intentional hybrid moms and working in those in-between hours and how they have taken those skills and moved on to their next brilliant and extraordinary chapters of their lives. So that was really the, how everything just sort of came to be. And I
yeah.
also realized that, did sort of initially, did you have sort of like that fear and insecurity of, gee, what if nobody listens? Yes, of course, I had all of that, but then I realized these stories need to be out there and I think it would find its audience. And, I realized that when we sort of own what we have, and know what we offer to the world, there's no ceiling. I feel like we are unlimited in terms of our ability to do whatever it is we want to do. And I'm just a huge fan of women who are moms, who have done this hard work behind the scenes and then have pushed forward and have created just extraordinary next chapters from cookie companies. And I mean, I just have a huge amount of sort of versatility in the women that I've interviewed over the years.
Yes, 100%. I think it's kind of going back to the tech boob. Love that term, by the
I
way.
love it.
But
I
to the
own
tech,
this. I
yes,
totally own it.
yes,
Yeah.
trademark that. But to the tech boob thing, what I find in talking to a lot of clients and women of all ages, and
Mm,
not as much men, which is interesting.
mm,
But we weigh ourselves down with these limiting beliefs of, I'm too old, it's too late, I don't have the skills to do that. And so we have these great ideas, but
mhm.
we will fall into like, well, but.
Right.
And so you had this spark of an idea. You started hearing these really inspirational stories and you thought these need to be out there. I have this really inspiring platform that I can create to get these stories out there. And I have no idea how to get them out there with the tech, and I am going to figure it out. So,
Right.
for someone that is listening right now, that is like, well, I have an idea. I've always
Mhm.
had this thing that I've wanted to do. And there are these barriers that are in my way. Maybe it is I'm too old, or it just feels like way too late. There are many other people doing this thing, or I don't have all of the skills I need. What would you say to that woman right now to help her break through some of those barriers?
First of all, you are never too old and it is never too late to pursue something that you absolutely love. And I also would like to say that women, unlike men, we always feel that we have to have our ducks in a row, that everything has to be perfect before we can launch. And a guy can have like maybe a half-baked idea and he's like going out and selling it. And the woman's like, she's further along. She doesn't have the confidence that she needs. First of all, the ducks will never all be in a row. So just know that. And the best way to start on that journey is one tiny baby step. And the beauty of taking a small step at a time is if you go down a pathway and you realize, this is not what I anticipated, you could turn around and walk back the other way and you haven't invested that much time and effort and money into it. But it's the momentum that you are doing that is going to create more and more happening for you. And so you have an idea, like I had no idea how to edit.
Hmm.
So I knew that I had to hire an editor, and I found someone who, or, to this day is actually a VA that I work with. And, she is my editor after it's been like 3 years. So I'm a big believer in, okay, if I don't have that skill set, I'm going to find someone who does, and I will hire them to work with me. And, there's people all over the planet who can help you do that for, at the price point that you feel comfortable putting out there. But I think what's so important for a woman is you're never too old. It's never too late. Believe in yourself, because you are extraordinary. And if you have an idea, that idea deserves to be heard and seen, and it deserves to be out there. And if it doesn't go out there because we're afraid to put it out there, it can't do anything. And so once an idea is out there, it has the opportunity to grow. Other people have the opportunity to dial into it, whatever it may be, whether it's a product or a service or a podcast or a clothing line, whatever it is, that have that self-belief. And is it scary? 100%.
Mhm.
And do you oftentimes kind of think to myself, what the hell am I doing? 100%. But having that conviction is so powerful. And I think that is what is going to carry you forward. I know that's what's carried me forward through all is anyone going to be listening? Does anyone really care? And then over the years, I've realized, yes, they are listening. And yes, they do care. And your audience will find you if you are organic and honest and truthful and being who you are. I think all of that plays into taking whatever you might have and turning it into your next chapter and growing it from there.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. And I could not agree more. And to piggyback on that, I think sometimes we make it so much about ourselves and what happens when I fail and what
Mhm.
happens if I look foolish. And I always remind myself and the women that I help to remember that's actually a very selfish way of looking at it. When you have an idea, whether
Mhm.
it's the Mom to More podcast, or as you said, a cookie company or a clothing line, it's really about the people it will impact. And so by
Mhm.
holding this idea in, you're actually being selfish and holding
Yeah,
it back from the people that will benefit from it. I think
right.
if one person listened to one episode of your podcast and got something amazing from it, that's enough, and
I've
now we know it's
I've
way
done my
more than
job.
one person. Yeah.
Yes,
But
yeah.
like, gosh, it's our job to take these ideas and spread them, because that's how we make the world better. Not to sound too kumbaya, but that's really what it's all about. Not,
100%. I also would, if I could
but
add something
yeah.
about, you mentioned failure. And I think we all fail. And I don't like that word because it sounds so final. And
Mm,
so what I learned, if something doesn't go the way I thought it was going to go, or I thought it should have gone, I am now more educated. So I've learned, I'm like, okay, that doesn't work. I'm going to pivot, and moms are super good at pivoting, and I'm going to try something else. And I think the greatest failure in life is you don't want to get to the end of your life and go, gee, I wonder what if. And so just for that reason, go for it. You want to be able to say, I gave it 110%, and either it worked or it didn't, but I was more knowledgeable because it might not have worked, and I was able to pivot and, oh my gosh, look what I created, because that didn't work, but this really, really did. And so to have that growth mindset, that we talked about earlier, and self-belief, so much of it is self-belief. I believe it. If you can dream it, you can do it.
absolutely. Yeah. I think the worst thing that we can do is get to the end of our life and look
Yeah.
back with regret. And I think that is, there is a study that shows that is the number one regret of the dying is unfulfilled dreams. It's
Mm,
not, I work too much or I didn't tell people I love them, although they are rank up there. It is, I
right.
should have done that thing I really wanted to do. So
Right.
we don't want that.
No, we don't.
Let's end by talking about some of the really inspiring stories that you have heard on the Mom to More podcast. So, can you think of the top three? I'm sure there's so many, but three really inspiring stories of moms that took this motherhood experience and spun it off into something great.
Absolutely. Well, I have 65 episodes, so it's sort of like Sophie's Choice. How do you choose your
Yes,
favorite
right.
child? That sort of thing. But from a business perspective, I've had several women who've just blown me away. One is a woman named Susan DeMarco, and she was written up actually in USA Today as going from stay-at-home mom to CEO, and she dialed it back, was a stay-at-home mom to, she has 4 boys, I think, 3 or 4 boys.
Mhm.
And she went back to her background was accounting. And so she ended up going back to a firm and took a job that arguably could have been below her skill level, but she actually worked her way all the way up to being CEO of this
Wow.
company and using those mom skills that she honed and fine tuned over the years of raising her boys. So Susan's story is amazing. A woman named Rayalana Reiner, she built a national children's consignment franchise. And what I loved about this story was she actually read the book Franchising for Dummies because she knew she had an idea here and she's trying to figure out, okay, how do I grow it? But her idea started because they lived in a small town. They couldn't really afford much. They had, 3 kids and 1 salary. And she was trying to figure out, how can I dress my kids in a way that I feel that they deserve without spending a lot of money? And she literally started a consignment business in
Mm.
her living room. And when it overtook her living room and basically their house, and she realized, okay, I've got something here. And then she started with the franchising. She now franchises in, I think, 28 states and allowing
Wow.
other moms the opportunity to start businesses doing what she's doing. And just, for her, like getting comfortable with the leadership role and being the
Mm.
face of the company, that was just invaluable. And I'd say another woman, in the nonprofit vein, a woman named Terry Grail. She's in out of Detroit, Michigan, outside of the Detroit area, and she experienced homelessness
Mm.
as a young child, and teasing just on a really intense level, and but really the homelessness. But her mom was always trying to make their home as beautiful as possible. She got into interior design. Someone reached out to her and said, "Hey, could you come into this woman's shelter and paint a wall?"
Mm.
And she goes into the shelter and she realized, I need to do more than just paint a wall. I need to give them real furniture. I need to give them real like linens and maybe a happy pillow that has birds on it or polka dots. She happens to love polka dots. And so she started a nonprofit called Enchanted Makeovers, and it helps um, abused women, women who are homeless with their kids, a soft place to land, a place that
Mm.
still keeps up their sense of humanity and gives them skills. There's like a sewing room because she loves to sew, and she teaches them how these additional skills. It has become a huge success. She has been on TV, like you name it, she's been on it. And all because she was really paying it forward from the years that she had been, experienced all, like traumas of when she was younger. And I look at all 3 of these women who are
Mm.
CEOs in their own right, and I think, wow, they started from such places of humility and humbleness, and then took those skills from their motherhood years and fought through their insecurities, fought through, oh, what happens if it doesn't, yeah, that sort of thing. And they have just persevered and said, you know what? I may not be as smart as that other person, but I'm going to work a lot harder than them. And that is how I'm going to make this happen. And all 3 of them have just created extraordinary legacies to their life, moving forward. And it's just people like that where I'm just
Wow.
like, oh my God, these women are extraordinary. And I learn from everyone that I have the privilege of interviewing.
That's incredible. And, we hear these stories. I'm sure you're
Yeah.
familiar with Vera Wang's story of
Yeah.
her, designing her own wedding dress at 40. And that was her entry into that. And then Julia Child has a late bloomer story. And, all these famous people story, but there are
Yeah.
women among us every single day. And that's what I love so much about your platform. You're really highlighting those stories. So
Thank
if
you.
you are listening, I think it is so powerful to boost ourselves and remind ourselves that these things are possible by hearing other women who are doing it too. So definitely give Mom to More a listen so you can remind yourself of that and then go do
Right.
your own thing. So Sharon,
Yeah.
let everybody know where they can find Mom to More and then where they can connect with you.
Well, Mom to More, MOMTOMORE. So Mom to More is everywhere. It's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, my website, momtomore.com. You can find the podcast there, resources, blogs, some of my favorite products. The podcast is wherever you listen in, Apple, Spotify. I have a YouTube channel, again, at Mom to More. And so that's how you would find me. And I also wanted to offer up to all the listeners, I would like to give you all my free guide. And that is called 15 Mom Skills that are actually business superpowers and where those skills could take you. You can go to momtomore.com. There's going to be a pop-up. Pop that in there, and I can make sure that that will be sent to you. And also, what I realize that it's sort of wild how many of us have completely forgotten what we're actually good of. After all those years of putting everyone first, and this guide will really help you see yourself again and ideas for moving forward from there. Also, DM me on Instagram, and I will make sure that I send it straight to you. And after reading it, if you would like to go a little deeper, I will also offer a free 20-minute one-on-one mentorship session where we can really begin to map out your next chapter together. And those first 20 minutes are going to be on me.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes. And Sharon, this was really awesome. I am definitely buying that motherhood is your biggest competitive advantage. I kind of was buying it in the very beginning, but you laid a very compelling case. And so I'm excited for our listeners to fully buy into that idea as well, whether they are mothers or not. I think it's really a societal shift that we need to move into because mothers are the backbone of our society. And many
We
of
are.
us are taking career breaks to raise children, which is worthy work, and then deserve to get back into the workforce, whether that is moving back into corporate jobs or starting our own entrepreneurial pursuits. So thank you for
True.
laying out such a compelling case. And thank you for being here today.
Krista, it's been a joy. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, we will be back with you next week.